And speaking about Gen Z, it seems like more Gen Z than ever are complaining about mental health, even before the pandemic, which we can get to. So just before we get, into the nitty-gritty, what is mental health?
Mental health refers to our emotional and psychological and social well-being. You've got the emotional side of things where it's about managing and expressing your emotions but effectively. Um, it's about feeling kind of generally okay, that you're able to enjoy life and that you can bounce back from stress and adversity. It's absolutely fair to feel feelings of sadness, anger, loneliness, but it's about how much that impacts you and how long it impacts you. So, bouncing back from the more negative emotions you might experience. And then the psychological well-being is about being able to use your cognitive abilities, like your understanding, your learning, having a sense of purpose and being able to contribute like to school, to work, those kinds of things. And then finally, I mentioned social well-being. So that's obviously your social interactions, your relationships, being able to be in healthy relationships and connected to your community is also a big part of mental health.
So how are Gen Z's mental health being
Mm.
affected by social media? And does this all have to do with dopamine, or are there other factors involved?
I think there's a combination of factors. There's a lot of societal changes and shifts that have contributed to poor mental health. I do agree that social media has a part to play because there is more awareness and education, um, which can be a good thing, but then unfortunately, there's a lot of poor information or misinformation out there, which unfortunately can produce some challenges, as I'm sure you're aware. Um, so I think that you've got that increased awareness, um, you know, in today's world compared to older generations, we can understand pretty much anything because we have the internet and we can find out what's going on in the world and look at videos and images and different news articles. Whereas our family's generations, it wasn't as easily accessible. So that increased awareness is a good thing to some extent, but it certainly impacts our mental health when we're opening our phones and seeing so much more war and videos and so much negativity that happens in the world. And you said about why there may be more cases of poor mental health for Gen Z. I think we've got to be aware that life is different today. Yes, we grew up with the internet and smartphones, which has influenced how we interact with the world. But I think there are more global issues such as climate change, for example, um, economic uncertainty that they've experienced from a really young age and has a lot of awareness and constant connectivity to the internet and to awareness about all these different factors in life. So there's a lot more pressures, I think, to today's young people.
And just going out on a limb to ask this question, so I think we're talking about two things that will eventually will cause something. So we're talking about neuroplasticity around technology, but
Hmm.
also around an environment that is increasingly uncertain and very toxic. So you're talking about
Yes.
economic uncertainty, climate change, all of the wars and, you know, horrible atrocities that are taking place in the world. And so, for a
Yeah.
generation that is growing up with that, but is also hyper connected and hyper stimulated by those things,
Hmm.
I guess my question is, what is the what does the future look like for those groups of people that are growing up with these very toxic circumstances? We'll call it like that.
I mean, it's as you said earlier, there's evidence that we're experiencing more mental health than ever. If you just take young people, when I first entered into the world of psychology, this was over 10 years ago, and I took a particular interest in children and young people's mental health because I personally experienced an eating disorder. And at the time when I first qualified, I remember it being 1 in 10 people experience, sorry, 1 in 10 young people experience poor mental health. And as of today, that is now 1 in 5. And that's just in the 10 years that I've been practicing. So, we are seeing more mental illness in this particular generation and children and young people because of the things that you mentioned earlier.
So, in sole regards to mental health, what misconceptions or misunderstandings do people have about mental health that you've experienced?
I think that people need to be more aware about the environments that they're in and
Mhm.
how the influence of their relationships, their education, their workplaces, how much of an influence that has on our mental health. People need to be in environments where they can be their true, authentic selves, where they are supported for who they are. They can be open and honest about who they are and what they're feeling, and have that psychological safety that nothing bad is going to happen if they do that. And I see a lot of environments where people don't feel they have the psychological safety to be themselves, to be open and honest and authentic. So I think, yeah, people need to be kinder to each other and more open-minded when it comes to who we are, how we're feeling, how we want to express ourselves.